I'm Noah, 35 years old, the founder and CEO of Lumalogic, a tech company building a user behavior analytics platform, now implemented across education and finance systems in over 10 states. I live with my wife, Natalie, and our 2 daughters in a modest home tucked away in Chicago's northern suburbs. It's not much to look at from the outside, but it's warm enough that every evening when I walk through the door, I feel like I no longer have anything left to prove to anyone. But let me take you back further to where it all began. Growing up, I was always the other son, the one who existed in the shadow of Grayson, my older brother by 2 years. He was everything they said I wasn't: calm, smart, dependable, the golden standard against which I was constantly measured. My parents never meant harm. Their comparisons were wrapped in soft tones, spoken with what felt like sincerity. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. At first, those words didn't sting as much. Kids are resilient, or so we think. But over time, they burrowed deep into my mind, shaping how I saw myself, or rather, how I failed to see myself outside of Grayson's reflection. There were moments when I tried harder, desperate to earn even a fraction of the praise he received effortlessly. Other times, I just gave up, believing I'd never measure up anyway. And while my parents may have thought these comparisons would push me to greatness, they only pushed me farther into silence, into a quiet corner where I could hide from expectations I couldn't meet. Fast forward to 3 years ago, on a crisp autumn evening at a promotion party for Grayson. He had just been named director of strategy at a major firm, a title that came with prestige and admiration, especially in our family circles. The backyard of his house buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of conversation. My wife, Natalie, walked beside me, holding Anna's hand while Zoe skipped ahead, her giggles cutting through the noise. We greeted relatives, exchanged pleasantries, and settled into the rhythm of the gathering. It should have been an ordinary night. But then something shifted. Someone at a nearby table turned to me mid-conversation and asked casually, "So, Noah, how's work going these days?" "It's going well," I replied, keeping my tone light. "Actually, I'm planning to start my own business soon. Thought I'd give entrepreneurship a shot." Before I could elaborate, Grayson cut in sharp, dismissive, his voice loud enough to silence everyone within earshot. "Get your life together. Wake up. You're becoming a joke to everyone." The air froze. Conversation stalled. Eyes darted between us, some curious, others pitying. Under the table, Natalie gently squeezed my hand, but I didn't react. I simply stared down at my glass, focusing on the way the ice cubes clinked softly as I stirred them. Inside, though, emotions churned: anger, shame, defiance, all colliding in a storm I refused to unleash. That night, as I drove home under the dim glow of streetlights, the weight of Grayson's words pressed heavily on me. They weren't new. I'd heard variations of them my entire life. But this time, they carried a different kind of sting, one that forced me to confront a question I'd avoided for years. Am I strong enough to step out of his shadow? The night of Grayson's promotion party, I drove home with a storm brewing inside me. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, and the quiet hum of the car engine felt like an echo of my racing thoughts. Am I strong enough? That question lingered in my mind long after the house lights dimmed and everyone had gone to bed. But as morning broke, I realized something. Strength isn't about proving yourself to others, it's about believing in your own worth when no one else does. From that day forward, I threw myself into building Lumalogic. It wasn't easy, far from it. Every step was a battle against doubt, rejection, and failure. In those early years, Michael, my co-founder and best friend since college, became both my sounding board and my lifeline. Together, we worked out of his cramped apartment, surrounded by empty coffee cups and half-eaten takeout boxes. The 2 laptops on the kitchen table were our command center, where countless late nights turned into early mornings. One of the hardest moments came 6 months in, during our first pitch to investors. We had spent weeks preparing, refining every detail of the presentation. When we walked into that sleek conference room, I felt confident for the first time in what seemed like forever. But confidence doesn't guarantee success. Halfway through the demo, the software crashed, a bug neither of us had caught during testing. The room fell silent except for the faint tapping of pens against the polished wooden table. One investor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and said flatly, "This is amateur hour." Walking out of that meeting, I wanted to quit. Everything felt futile. But Michael reminded me why we started this journey: not for validation, but because we believed in the potential of what we were building. So, I kept going. Slowly, painfully, Lumalogic began to grow. Our breakthrough came 3 years later, when a small regional school district agreed to pilot our platform. Their feedback transformed our product, making it scalable and reliable. Word spread, and soon other institutions followed suit. Despite the progress, I stayed behind the scenes, while Michael handled public-facing events and media appearances. I focused on strategy and operations. My name rarely appeared in press releases or company emails, and I preferred it that way. To most employees, I was just another executive advisor, a shadowy figure whose approval signatures showed up on documents without explanation. Even Grayson, who joined Lumalogic 2 years ago, didn't suspect anything. He treated me with polite indifference, occasionally nodding in acknowledgement during meetings, but never questioning my role beyond the surface level. Meanwhile, Grayson's life unfolded differently. Success came easily to him, or so it seemed. Promotions piled up, accolades poured in, and our parents couldn't stop talking about him. But beneath the polished exterior, cracks began to form. Over time, he grew distant, not just from me but from everyone. His arrogance alienated colleagues, and his inability to listen made collaboration nearly impossible. Once, at a family dinner, he dismissed Zoe's excitement about her school project with a curt, "That's nice," before turning back to his phone. Natalie shot me a sympathetic glance, and I knew she saw it too, the gap between the person Grayson thought he was and the person he actually became. Then came the gala celebrating Lumalogic's 10th anniversary, a milestone. Michael insisted we mark publicly. Reluctantly, I agreed, though I had no intention of stepping into the spotlight. Imagine my surprise when, halfway through dessert, the MC announced, "Please welcome Mr. Noah Green, co-founder and executive strategic advisor," to deliver the opening remarks. I froze, the knife still hovering over my plate. All eyes turned to me, including Grayson's. For a brief moment, I considered pretending I hadn't heard. But then Natalie gently touched my sleeve and whispered, "They're calling you." Taking a deep breath, I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked to the stage. As I approached the podium, I glanced toward the wings, where Michael stood watching intently. He gave me a subtle nod, a gesture meant to remind me that this moment belonged to me. With steady hands, I picked up the microphone and began speaking. I talked about our journey from to laptops in a dorm room to partnerships spanning 10 states. I highlighted the challenges we faced and celebrated the resilience of our team. When I scanned the audience, I noticed Grayson sitting stiffly beside our parents. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then finally settled on something resembling shock. For years, he had looked down on me, dismissing my efforts as aimless dreaming. Now, here I was, standing under the spotlight, revealing a truth he wasn't ready to face. After finishing my speech, I returned to my seat. Natalie squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with pride. Around us, conversations resumed, laughter bubbled up, and applause echoed through the room. Yet Grayson remained silent. Without a word, he slipped away, leaving his chair empty. The night of the gala ended without further incident. But the silence that followed was heavier than any words could have been. Grayson disappeared before I finished my speech, and by the time we left the venue, he was nowhere to be found. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he had business to attend to, or simply wanted some space. But deep down, I knew something was off. The way he looked at me when I stood on that stage wasn't anger. It was confusion mixed with disbelief, as if his entire worldview had shattered in an instant. The next morning came too early. At exactly 7 a.m., a sharp, frantic ring pierced through the quiet of our home. Natalie and I exchanged glances. No one ever visited this early unless it was urgent. I opened the door to find Grayson standing there, reeking of alcohol. His shirt wrinkled and untucked, eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept all night. He swayed slightly, his face twisted into a grimace of rage and humiliation. Before I could say a word, he growled through clenched teeth, "You're a piece of... You did that on purpose to humiliate me in front of Mom, Dad, everyone." His voice cracked under the weight of his emotions, loud and wild, accusations spilling out in every direction. I tried to speak, to explain that I never planned for the MC to call my name, that I had no idea how public my role would become. But nothing got through. Grayson wasn't listening. Years of pressure, pride, and buried insecurity finally boiled over. He lunged forward, not to hit me, but to unleash everything he'd held back for far too long. Natalie stepped in between us, her hands trembling as she grabbed her phone. Within minutes, there was a knock at the door. The police. I knew then this had gone way too far. At 5 p.m. that afternoon, the officer called me back. Grayson had sobered up and calmed down. I hung up the phone, grabbed my coat, and drove to the station without overthinking. Not because I'd forgotten what happened that morning, but because I knew if there was ever a time to forgive, maybe this was it. The bail process didn't take long. When I walked in, Grayson was sitting on a bench in the hallway, head down, hands clasped together. He still smelled of alcohol, and his eyes were dull from lack of sleep. But the anger was gone. What remained was something quiet and heavy, like he'd spent the whole day trying to peel off a shell he hadn't even realized he'd been wearing for years. On the drive back, he didn't say a word. We just sat there in silence. the only sounds being the ticking turn signal and the soft hum of the AC. It wasn't until we turned onto the road near home that he finally spoke. His voice was low and tired. "I'm sorry." It was a short sentence, but it carried weight, and it was enough for me to understand the rest of it. We needed to talk about this somewhere quieter, somewhere without honking horns or memories tangled in guilt and pride. So, instead of going home, I turned into a small coffee shop on the north corner, the one where we used to grab breakfast back in college. Not for nostalgia, but because it was quiet enough, far enough for the two of us to face each other honestly. 30 minutes after we sat down, he was still silent, just staring at the cup of coffee in front of him. Then, finally, he looked up, his voice low and slow. "Starting tomorrow, I'm quitting the company." I froze. "Why?" He looked straight at me, no hesitation in his eyes. "I've been fooling myself about how capable I really am. I kept thinking I earned everything I was talented because I deserved it, never realizing the one backing me up this whole time was you." At that moment, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The man sitting across from me, the same man who once arrogantly told me, "You're never going to make it if you keep doing things your way," was now looking at me with an expression of recognition, not bitterness, just honesty. I placed my hand on the table and gently shook my head. "You're wrong. I never backed you up." Then I told him everything. 2 years ago, when his resume landed at Lumalogic, I found out through Michael. Michael asked me what I thought, and all I said was, follow the usual hiring process. Don't say anything to him. And he passed that highly competitive interview process on his merit. There were times I didn't like how he treated me, but I always had to admit one thing: he was damn good at what he did. The director of strategy position he earned after 2 years? There was never any hand-pulling from me. I never vouched for him, never pushed him up the ladder. He earned it all himself. And as a founder of that company, I added, I've never felt more proud of any employee than I did of my brother. As for me, I continued, I was just a little luckier. That's all. Right after I finished speaking, Grayson went quiet. He didn't argue, and he didn't agree either. His eyes still held that look of confusion, like someone who'd just been pulled out of a long dream but hadn't quite figured out what was real and what was only imagined. I sat there for a few more seconds, watching him, then said gently, all right, if you're still doubting your abilities, then this time, I'll let you prove it. Grayson looked up. I continued slowly, clearly, as if the decision had already been made long before. The upcoming project, the one to upgrade the user data analytics system for the West Side education chain, will be the lead. I won't be involved at any stage. Tomorrow morning, all the project files will be sent to your company email. From that point on, I stay out of it. He didn't respond right away, but in his eyes, maybe for the first time in a long while, I saw a glimpse of the older brother I used to know, someone with presence, with purpose, and with pressure. But the kind of pressure you step into willingly, not something you try to escape from. And I understood this wasn't a gift. It was a chance for him to stand on his own 2 feet. This time, for real. The next morning, I sent Grayson an email with the project files attached. The subject line was simple: Westside Education Chain Upgrade Project, you're in charge. I didn't add any extra words of encouragement or advice. He didn't need them. By now, I knew he understood what this meant, not just for him, but for us. For weeks, Grayson threw himself into the work like I'd never seen before. Early mornings, late nights, endless meetings. It was as if he had something to prove, not just to me or the company, but to himself. There were moments when I saw glimpses of the old Grayson creeping back in, his frustration bubbling over during team discussions, his impatience flaring when deadlines loomed. But there was also a new side to him, one that surprised even me. He started listening, not just hearing, but truly listening to feedback from his team. He asked questions instead of dictating answers. Slowly, he began earning their respect, and more importantly, he earned his own. One evening, about 2 months into the project, I walked past his office on my way out. The lights were still on, and through the glass walls I could see him hunched over his desk, surrounded by papers and half-empty coffee cups. His tie was loose, sleeves rolled up, and his face was buried in a spreadsheet. For a moment I considered knocking, but then I stopped myself. This wasn't my project anymore. It was his battlefield, and he needed to fight it alone. As the weeks turned into months, the pressure mounted. The West Side education chain was one of our biggest clients, and the stakes were high. Any misstep could cost Lumalogic not only revenue but also its reputation. During one particularly tense meeting, Grayson faced criticism from senior leadership for delays in the initial rollout phase. I watched silently from the corner of the room as he stood his ground, defending his decisions with clarity and conviction. When the meeting ended, he approached me hesitantly. "Do you think I'm doing okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "You're doing more than okay. Trust yourself." It wasn't until my mom's birthday party 2 months later that things truly shifted within our family. As usual, the entire extended clan gathered at her house, the same long table by the window, the same cake from her favorite bakery. Everything felt familiar except for one thing: the person being compared had changed. Midway through the party, Uncle Matthew, one of our cousins from Dad's side, raised his glass and said loudly, "Grayson's really talented, and yet, he's just working under Noah. I've got to say, I really admire you, Noah." Before the silence could settle, Mom chimed in immediately. "That's right. Noah is our pride now. Grayson still has a lot to learn." I glanced across the table. Grayson was smiling politely, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a mix of discomfort and quiet shame that he tried to hide behind his composed expression. And right then, I knew what I had to do. Standing up, I cleared my throat. All eyes turned to me. "Uncle Matthew," I began, my tone steady, "there's something I need to clarify. Grayson, my brother, is incredibly skilled. The director of strategy role he holds now is a result of his ability and relentless effort. I had no hand in that process. If there's any difference between him and me, it's that I got lucky enough to start a business at the right time and see it succeed." I paused, looking around the table, where curious eyes, both adult and child, were watching me intently. Then, softer but firm, I added, "Mom, both Grayson and I are your sons. Please stop comparing us. We're two different people, each with our strengths and weaknesses." The room fell silent. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Uncle Jordan, Dad's younger brother, broke the silence. His voice was calm but resolute. "Noah's right. We've been wrong about this for a long time." That night, as everyone returned to their conversations and laughter, Grayson pulled me aside. He handed me a beer and motioned for me to follow him outside. Under the soft yellow glow of the patio lights, he leaned against the railing and took a sip. "Thanks for standing up for me in front of everyone," he said quietly. "And I'm sorry for all those years I never did the same for you." His words carried more weight than any apology ever could. 6 months later, the project wrapped up, not just on time, but beyond expectations. The upgrade system launched successfully, bringing in significant revenue and opening doors for partnerships with school systems across 3 new states. As the lead on the project, Grayson received a generous bonus. But to me, the real achievement was seeing him believe in himself, not because of reputation or favoritism, but because he had earned it. 6 months after the West Side education chain project wrapped up, Grayson approached me with a decision that caught me off guard. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, and he invited me to the same cafe where we'd once sat after the night at the police station. As soon as the coffee arrived, he got straight to the point. "I'm planning to resign," he said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "I'll send in my letter tomorrow. Could you help push it through?" For a moment, I was silent. My mind raced with questions. Was something wrong? Had something happened to make him want to leave? Finally, I asked him outright, "Why?" He didn't look away. "I've made up my mind. I want to start something of my own, a new path. Can you help me get started? Maybe as an advisor or an investor." I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my chair. Deep down, I knew that if he left, it would feel like losing my left hand. Over the past few years, Grayson had become someone I relied on entirely within the leadership team. But I also understood that he had his own road to take, his own fire to chase, and I couldn't let my selfishness stand in the way of that. So, in the end, I nodded. "All right, I'll help. Not because you're my brother, but because you've earned that chance." 2 months later, Grayson's company officially opened its doors. That morning, Natalie, the kids, and I arrived early at the new headquarters, a small but bright office in Midtown. The space was neatly organized, and the sign Orion Insights hung proudly on the front glass. Simple, solid. It wasn't the kind of startup that threw money at appearances, but it felt like a place built to last, steady enough to begin something real. The guest list was modest: a few old friends, some partners, and the team Grayson had just brought on board. The ceremony started right on time, beginning with a brief introduction before the MC invited Grayson up to speak. He walked out slowly, dressed in a gray suit, hair neatly styled. But I knew he was still the same brother I'd always known, only now, with a different view of himself. Grayson took the mic and gave a slight nod to the crowd. He stood there for a moment, then began, his voice calm and measured. "Thank you all for being here today. Honestly, I never thought I'd have a moment like this." He paused, giving a small smile, the kind that comes from someone who has shed old pride and is learning how to face things with honesty. I thought I was fine. I thought I was good. And I believed there was nothing I needed to change until someone came along who didn't say a word. But the way he lived made it impossible for me to keep lying to myself. He paused again, scanning the crowd until his eyes found mine. When they did, he gave a slight, deliberate nod. "Noah, if you don't mind, would you come up here for a moment?" I stood and made my way up not because I felt obligated, but because I understood. That thank you wasn't easy for him to say, and if today was the first time he was choosing to speak from the heart, I needed to be there. As I reached him, he raised a hand and gave me a light pat on the shoulder. Nothing showy, just a simple gesture, but it was real. Then he continued, this time not looking at anyone else, just straight ahead. If it weren't for you, I'd still be proud of a version of myself that no longer fits. You didn't lecture me. You didn't blame me. You just lived right, and that alone made me realize I needed to change. He paused again, and for the first time that day, I heard a slight catch in his voice. Then came the most honest words he'd ever spoken. I know I haven't been a good brother, but if today is a beginning, then I wanted to start with a thank you, and I'm sorry. A wave of applause followed his speech. I turned to him and pulled him into a hug tight, real, and in that moment, I knew he had truly changed. After the ceremony, as Natalie, the kids, and I prepared to leave, Grayson was still busy speaking with partners. We didn't say anything more, just a nod between us as a goodbye, and that was enough. Today, for months after Grayson started Orion Insights, things are going steadily for both him and me. And as I sit here reflecting on everything that's happened, I realize the story isn't just about us. It's about anyone who's ever felt smaller because of someone else's expectations. So, if you're one of those people, if you've ever been compared, doubted, or told you're not enough, I want to say this. Don't waste your life trying to become someone's idea of enough. Don't let a careless comment make you doubt your worth. You don't need to be better. You don't need to win. You just need to keep going in your way. And if someone once looked down on you, let time and your actions be the answer. No noise, no proving, just long enough that they can't help but look back. Before I wrap this up, I want to ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you have done after hearing those hurtful words from your brother? Would you have stood up right then and laid it all out in front of everyone? Or would you have walked away in silence, letting the results speak for themselves? Whatever your choice, I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, because every choice has its reason. And maybe, just maybe, this story reflects something from your own life too. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in the next chapter of our journey.